Prepare to blast off on another epic episode of the Hyper Anomalous Esoteric Research Organization Podcast, aka Hero Paranormal. Broadcasting just south of the old Sherman Ranch in the Uinta Basin of Utah. My name is Ryan, the anomalous ambassador of the airwaves, bringing you an epic episode today. Is it possible that the declassification of certain documents and programs are giving us a rare glimpse inside black budget projects run by sorceress elites? Shocking revelations are brought by groundbreaking podcaster and investigator Ryder Lee. You may know Ryder from his popular podcast, Raised by Giants. We are going to address Project Monarch, hallucinogens, Cindy Gottlieb, MKUltra, remote viewing, and even a little bit of the secret space program. Regardless of your thoughts on this, it's going to get weird. And we are going to delve into what it all really means when it comes to manipulating our reality and controlling the masses. If you have not gone over to Patreon and looked up Hero Paranormal and subscribed, I highly recommend it. There is a ton of content behind the paywall you're missing out on. You can also access that content via Podbean at heroparanormal.com. Well, get ready to blast off on another amazing podcast in 3, 2, 1.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
We've got a great guest today, Ryder Lee. It's not hard to promote Ryder. He sort of sells himself with all the groundbreaking investigative work he does and his podcasting. He's one of my favorite guys to talk about and to talk to. So, Ryder Lee, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Appreciate you having me back on. This is, the third time? You've been on my show 3 times, I think, and this is the third one on yours, so I appreciate you, my friend. I'm looking forward to diving into some awesome topics with you.
Yeah, I think this is I think it's a trifecta. This is 3. I think that's great. I'm super excited and stoked about this one because we're going to be going into the darker than dark projects, black projects, remote viewing, all sorts of strange areas where you've been doing a ton of research, talking to the right people. Where should we kick it off at?
Well, Ryan, I think that I guess we can go to where this really started for me. I started investigating into the MKUltra programs and the 149 declassified MKUltra projects. And I was reading through all those, and I'm discovering that there's 4 or 5 sub-projects that were dedicated just to researching ESP, remote viewing, and psychic abilities, right? And I'm digging deep into that, and then I'm also realizing that almost all of these sub-projects involve some kind of hallucinogenic substance. Mushrooms, LSD, which we know Cindy Gottlieb was the head of all of these programs, and he had a brother that was a plant biologist, and there's not any confirmation or any facts surrounding if his brother actually created a lot of the medications that he would experiment on subjects in the MKUltra programs or not. But I just thought that was an interesting little side note there, that he had a brother that was a plant biologist and he's experimenting on all these different chemicals and stuff in there. And also, I found out that a lot of the medications that people are on today come directly out of the MK Ultra programs as well, like antidepressants, antipsychotics, Adderall, Ritalin, and then we see this uptick in all of these medications in like the early 90s, and then into the 2000s, it starts hitting like really, really hard. Like you have a kid that, they take them to the doctor and he can't sit still. He's just being a kid, right? And they'll put the child on Adderall, Ritalin, so, and those medications came directly out of the MK Ultra program. So it's like, I'm putting all these things together and I'm really trying to dig down deep into exactly what's going on here. And then I start getting into the Stargate project, which is a DIA Army Intelligence ran program to study ESP, study remote viewing, and they had an official special access program. The Army started in 75, and then DIA started its special access program officially in 79. And I thought this was interesting because they were already doing this during the MK Ultra programs, and then when Stanford Research Institute, they split from Stanford in 1970, and then they became known as the Stanford Research Institute International in 1973, and then they became funded by the CIA directly through Sidney Gottlieb until 75. And then the Air Force picked up the rest of the funding to SRI. So all of these three-letter organizations had their hands in funding this kind of research. They were doing the research on their own. And then it was supposed to be given back to the CIA in 95, and then the CIA just shut down the Stargate project. Now, the Stargate project went by many different code names, as I'm sure that you're aware, Ryan. It went by Grill Flame, Sunstreak, I can't remember the other one, but there was many code names for the projects, and they did that all the time in the Cold War. I mean, when you look at Pat Price's work, whenever he remote viewed that secret military base in West Virginia, he was able to literally see inside of the base and read all of the paperwork that was within that base. And they also used code words and code names for all of the projects that they were doing there too, and it all revolved around billiards. It would be like 8-ball project or stuff like that. So it's really interesting, and it gets very, very convoluted. And I have all of the Stargate declassified documents. I have all of the Grill Flame declassified documents and the MK Ultra declassified documents, and just going through there. And I brought a lot of these people on my show because this is another angle of this too, Ryan, is that the people in the secret space program, asset people, and the super soldiers, they all talk about this Stargate project like it was an actual project to open up like a legitimate portal or like a real Stargate, and you could go through the Stargate and then you would go to a different dimension or a different reality or another planet and all of that, right? Or go to an alternate reality or whatever is going on there. And I was like, no, I don't think that that's what's going on. And I knew that the DIA had a program that was called the Stargate Project. So I just reached out to all of those people that were legitimately involved in the military operation to collect intelligence information and intelligence data on foreign assessments. So far I've had Angela Ford. She was my first guest that was officially a part of the Stargate Project. The next one was Lynn Buchanan, then Dr. David Morehouse, Dale Graft, and then most recently Dr. Paul Smith. So I really did that to try and debunk what a lot of what you could call wackadoos in the community, to let them realize that what they're talking about doesn't line up with reality. And that's the reason that I brought all these people on my show, and also to, study and figure out what's really going on, because there's a lot of things that just don't line up within the community that is not reality based. But one of them, well, two of them is for sure that's done because there's declassified documents on it, is the MK Ultra programs and the Stargate project. Right? Very verifiable. You can look either one of those programs up and read through all of those declassified documents. They are both very real projects and very verifiable reality. So,
yeah, and I'm really glad that you mentioned you're cutting to the chase with people like Angela Ford, Lynn Buchanan, Dale Morehouse, Paul Smith, because anymore it seems like all you have to do is go to a UFO conference or a expo, and I mean, remote viewing is kind of the new catchphrase. It's like, are you vegan? It's like everybody remote views, and that's just not exactly compatible with the realistic history and the CRV, the controlled remote viewing techniques that were used by the military. So I think that's super important that, the CIA wasn't funding all of these other more bohemian style remote viewing angles because it seems like, I have found, and I'm sure you've found, that when you start talking secret space program and remote viewing, that it goes to really random, crazy places. And speaking of that, what are your thoughts of the Mars jump room?
See, this is where a lot of confusing things happen, right? And see, we tend to want to just look at the fairy tale, nonsensical, extra-dimensional aspect of this whole thing, and people talking about things that we have absolutely no idea about, and that they're the only ones that have that information, and they're the only ones that can disseminate that information. But whenever you start bringing it down to earth and talking about real programs that actually happen here, and you start looking at all of the psychological manipulation and psychological experiments that these three-letter organizations were doing, that the military was doing, you start to understand that it's a very high possibility that a lot of this phenomenon can be boiled down to a psychological experiment, and that it's actually happening in your head. It's not external to you. And Carl Jung actually talks about that too. He talks about the abduction phenomenon being something in our psyche that we have yet to understand. And I personally believe that a lot of these memories and a lot of these things that people recover later on in their life was planted there on purpose, because we know that that's what the MK Ultra's role was to do. It was to de-pattern your mind, which is done through a myriad of ways, a lot of times torture. Now, people take torture as like you're being beaten, or that you're being, hurt in some kind of way, or that you're being tied up, and like, well, it doesn't have to be that. It can be way more subtle. It can be way easier than that. They can have you put your hands on the wall for 15 to 16 hours a day, in like an L position with your hands on the wall, and you're not able to move. Mm-hmm. And it's simple as that. Just because you've been de-patterned or you've been through one of these actual MK Ultra programs doesn't mean that it was horrendous to you, like physically. It's a psychological break. They want to break your mind. They want to split your consciousness in half, basically, and then create this other persona, this other compartmentalization of your brain, and then feed that compartmentalization with your brain with false ideas, false beliefs, false implanted memories. Now, I believe that the reason for that is to cover up real operations, what we might actually be doing in space, the militarization of space, what we might actually be doing with psychics and remote viewers in these three-letter organizations and top secret projects, and the MK Ultra stuff. I had Kathy O'Brien on my show. I've had her on twice now, and it really seems like, Ryan, that they were afraid of people rising up and going to Congress and going to government officials and being like, this is what you did to me. You created a person that you can 100% control. When you look at the MK Ultra and the Monarch programs, you see that it was all Earth-based stuff. They were being used for things that I can't exactly say on here, but like at a White House kind of Pentagon level with trafficking and drug mule and sometimes assassins, disinformation people, misinformation people, and I think that is what they were trying to cover up. And like I said, to cover up what they've been doing in space. So they've just made a dramatic, false implanted memories to get people talking about something that cannot ever be proven in order to get everyone believing in that. And then whenever they all believe in the fairy tale nonsense story, space battle, 20M back, advanced technology nonsense, the real thing can basically be covered up on the planet, including MK Ultra, including psychic spies, including possibly remote assassins or remote control people. What might be going on with the militarization of space? What we actually have going on in space? People, possibly humans on the moon, and possibly humans on Mars as well. And that's something that they would really want to cover up. So they created this whole narrative of secret space program assets and super soldier assets saving the world from evil aliens and evil reptilians.
Man, it is so important. This is so huge, and you've zoomed into a bunch of the stuff that I think is the most important, which is, if you have these crazy theories and conspiracies that go way beyond the line of comprehension and all kinds of people backing it, you surely can avoid more of the mundane accusations being made towards particular projects. And, at the same time, we know that people like the CIA, the government, and such, they can't fight fair, and I understand it. My father-in-law was a Navy SEAL, and he explained to me, I remember once, I'm like, oh, I'm sure they trained you in karate or jujitsu or something. And he was like, no, they train you to fight dirty. And, you are trained to basically win no matter what. And our intelligence community is also trained along the same lines. So it only makes sense that they would do this sort of stuff because it is, for the protection of civilians. And at the end of the day, it's so, our water stays on, our heat stays on, we keep paying taxes, yada, yada, yada. And I think it's super important that you mention how crazy with the SSP and a lot of this other stuff, how willing people are to acknowledge and believe 100% of it, no matter where it's coming from. And that's a big deal because there's a lot of real stuff that you mentioned with Monarch, MK Ultra, Sidney Gottlieb, remote viewing, the use of hallucinogenics, and all of these Army intelligence programs, DIA, SRI, all the three-letter agencies doing the real business behind closed doors. And, I remember, this takes me back. I remember when I went to my first SSE meeting, which is the Society for Scientific Exploration, of which I'm a member. And I realized quickly that this stuff is real. There are people doing this. And there's people, like when I went to my first IRVA meeting, which is the International Remote Viewers Association, I realized, we're just talking over, as people have these demonstrations. And, there are people that remote view for a living. So these are very real. Obviously, these are masters of their craft, not people that are, out back just shooting the crap behind the bar saying, oh, yeah, I remote view on the weekends. This is real stuff, and it is unfortunately very tainted because of everybody accepting everything. And yeah, the secret space program thing, that really reminds me of someone I know and someone I respect very much, which is Shane Bales. And I love what he mentioned, that the secret space is between your ears. Am I right?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And my personal belief, and there's no proof behind this is just theory and speculation, right? And I want to make that very clear here. But I believe that the MK Ultra programs were doubling as something else. There was another reason to do them. And what I've realized is a lot of these psychics and remote viewers that automatically had the abilities, right? They weren't trained to remote view. They didn't have a manual. There wasn't a step-by-step process in order to be able to, remote view, right? How they got their abilities was through a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience. Several people that I've talked to and that I know that I've talked to personally, their abilities were unlocked through a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience. Now, again, I'm differentiating here between the people that have been trained to do it. Mm-hmm. Now, you don't have to have an out-of-body experience. You don't have to have a near-death experience with create the ability to remote view, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the people that very first started this remote viewing had near-death experiences. The psychics, the real legit psychics, the real legit remote viewers, again, that wasn't trained, that just automatically had the abilities, like Ego Swan, right? Mm-hmm. He mentioned several times he was probably one of the best remote viewers in the history of remote viewing, mm-hmm. right? He had many out-of-body experiences whenever he was a kid due to being bullied. He mentioned that so many times. So what were they doing in the MK Ultra programs? And then what was the Monroe Institute also doing? Monroe Institute was trying to induce a out-of-body experience, an astral experience, to get your consciousness or your spirit or your soul or whatever you want to call it outside of your body. And that is a process of, you can also get that kind of process through trauma. You traumatize somebody to such a degree that their consciousness can literally leave their body. And that's a lot of what they were doing within the MK Ultra programs. They were traumatizing people. So I'm putting these pieces together. I'm like, okay, well, it's really interesting that they were doing this trauma-based stuff in order to compartmentalize the brain and induce this other personality, which they've been known for creating multiple personality disorder, DID, and all of these other mental health issues and these mental health problems through the MK Ultra programs. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that this was a dual use purpose, that they were not only trying to create slaves, trafficking slaves, assassins, disinformationalists, and a whole list of other categories that could be used for MK Ultra, but they were also trying to create psychics. Mm-hmm. And then that gets into my theory after the CIA shut down the Stargate project in '95, saying that there wasn't any useful intelligence data ever collected out of the program, which is a lie. No Army intelligence or DIA would ever keep a program running for almost 20 years to say that they didn't collect any valuable intelligence data. If they didn't get any good results within a year, they would have just shut it down then, right?
Totally.
So my personal thoughts is that they created a different program, a much more nefarious program, a much more invasive program. They found a different application for remote viewing other than just psychic spies and spying on other countries and sometimes within the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I think they switched this. It evolved into remote control and remote influence and sometimes even remote assassin program. And some people will disagree with me on that because, again, there's no proof for that. Right? It's just my personal thoughts and my personal opinions at connecting all of these dots. But there is kind of proof for it whenever you look around at our reality. People are behaving pretty strangely since, a lot of these, I don't know what they call them, I guess, disasters at schools and at bars and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what the program evolved into. It evolved into a remote influence or remote control. And there's actually a document from Ed May that I have that lays out the step-by-step process in order to remote influence people. So it's a very real phenomenon. It is possible. There's a document for it that tells you how to do it. Now, some people might say, "Oh, well, it's not as intrusive or whatever." But I'm like, hey, listen, we influence ourselves every day, Ryan. With our thoughts and our ideas, and some people use affirmation. They'll wake up, they'll say an affirmation, or they'll say an affirmation before they go to sleep, or whatever. That's you influencing yourself. So why would I not be able to influence other people psychically? If I can influence myself, I would be able to influence other people as well, if I'm a powerful enough psychic, right? And I think that's exactly what this whole thing evolved into, was a psychic remote influence and a lot of times, sometimes a remote assassin program. Now, I had a different idea and a different concept of what this was before, but then whenever I started thinking about it more, because Lynn Buchanan talked about that he was approached by Men in Black. They asked him if he could kill an individual with his mind. And he said that he wouldn't do it. But I asked him in our interview together, I was like, hey, is it possible to do, though? Could you have done it if you wanted to do it? And he said, yes. Yes, I could have. And I was like, well, that kind of seems like the lazy way to do it, right? You wouldn't just want to psychically kill somebody outright. You would want to psychically influence or psychically control somebody else to kill the target for you. And I'm like, holy shit, this is exactly what they've done and what they have been doing. And again, I think that program evolved once more. And then that program turned into a technology to where they don't have to use psychics or remote viewers to be able to influence people anymore. they just have a technology that they can flip on, which is proof of this. There's V2K technology. There's technology to be able to control your nervous system. There's patents for all of this stuff. And there's evidence that that's exactly what has happened, and they've completely taken the human element out of this. They no longer use psychics or remote viewers because they've developed it into a technology, and that's exactly what Shane the Ruiner talks about too, as well, that they're trying to take our natural spiritual abilities and duplicate it and turn it into some kind of technology to be able to use on the public. And then that also gets into supplanting thoughts, ideas, memories, beliefs into your head via technology. I just had Elena Freeland on my show. That show will be released soon, and she's written several books on this technology and how harmful and dangerous it can be to the public. And she also talks about dual use from military technology as well. They don't do anything for just one reason. It's a multi-layered purpose. They have it for something that they can use militarily, and then they also have it another use for it that can be used on the public and the general population. So whenever you look at these MK Ultra programs and you realize that a lot of these medications that people are on now came directly from the MK Ultra programs, and then you look at how they would psychically drive people in the MK Ultra programs. They would take in a looped audio message and play it over and over and over again. Nobody knows what was on those looped audio messages, and they've just transferred that type of looped audio message onto a TV screen in your living room and in your bedroom and in your pocket, right? So they depattern you with a traumatic event. They drug you, which I looked up statistics from 2014 to 2016, and almost half the U.S. population is on some sort of pharmaceutical medication. Mm-hmm. 66% of adults in the United States are on a pharmaceutical medication. And then they psychically drive you. They put that looped, repeated message on your TV screen, on your phone, to program you to believe whatever they want you to believe, which is exactly what they were doing in the early 50s with the MK Ultra programs. Now it's just open air testing. They're just doing it to everyone collectively.
Super dark. And yeah, I mean, I can get why they would want something where they can just flip a switch, more like a technology, although we already have it within us as human beings. And you brought something up that kind of ties into something you said earlier, which is much how the MK Ultra splits your consciousness and splits your mind in half. And I know this sounds strangely similar to hemisync technology, which comes from, go figure, the Monroe Institute. And for those that are unaware, Robert Monroe is an interesting cat. You should definitely read his book, Journeys Out of the Body. He was a Virginia businessman that started having experiences that were quite literally out of his body into this second, what he called the second body. But yeah, this Monroe Institute, Robert Monroe, and this technology of quite literally hemisync technology. What are your thoughts of hemisync and, the fact that it seems like just about everybody and anybody is using the Monroe app these days that is involved with government intelligence. And that's something that you didn't hear from me, but I mean, they have an app, and I've talked to a lot of people in intelligence, and they're like, oh yeah, we got it. We use it all the time. And they are taking trips to the Monroe Institute and getting trained in this. And it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek, everybody's doing it, nobody's talking about it sort of a thing in intelligence circles. So it sounds strangely similar to splitting your mind in half.
Yes, it is very similar. And Army intelligence and the CIA were both investigating the Monroe Institute as well. It's actually mentioned in the Grow Flame documents, the declassified documents, how they paid Robert Monroe, I think, $200 to go in and study, to send Army intelligence people to the Monroe Institute to study this out-of-body hemisync technology that Robert Monroe was working on. And there's declassified documents of the report that Army intelligence and the CIA both wrote a report on the Monroe Institute. And I think that because some of the people that I've interviewed from the Stargate Project commented on that they did have access to the Monroe Institute's hemisync tapes. Mm-hmm. And they were able to use them, but it wasn't like a requirement. So there's a really big connection between the Monroe Institute and Army intelligence and the CIA in all of these different projects, and I haven't quite connected the dots yet on what that role is. Now, I do know that some people have gotten confused by the Monroe Institute because they had it was called the Gateway Project, was the Monroe Institute's hemisync trying to induce a out-of-body experience. And some people that were involved in the Gateway Project got confused and thought that they were a part of a remote viewing DIA Army intelligence program.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've heard that too.
So
yep.
That's really muddied the waters between those two different programs. And it's also important to make clear as well is that the Monroe Institute wasn't into remote viewing. That had nothing to do with remote viewing, but somehow they are linked in there in some way. I'm going to have to read through all of those documents again and try and figure out what the linkage is there in some kind of factual evidence, but it has muddied the waters between the Monroe Institute's Gateway Project and then the DIA Army Intelligence Stargate Project as well. Well, the Monroe Institute is called the Gateway Experience. It's not the Gateway Project. But I think that people have gotten those two things confused, so it's important to make the distinction there that Monroe Institute was not studying remote viewing, had really nothing to do with DIA and Army Intelligence remote viewing program or ESP program, psychic program, and that they were two separate things running kind of simultaneously, even though the CIA and Army Intelligence did write reports, there's declassified reports on the Monroe Institute. I'm just going to have to do some more study on that and try and figure out the real connections and why they were so interested in the Monroe Institute inducing an out-of-body experience. But my personal thoughts is that it is connected to remote viewing. And if they can induce a out-of-body experience without having to use trauma, then they can create psychics on their own. They can create psychic spies for intelligence data. They can create psychic remote controllers, remote influencers. I think that without any proof, I think that that's a solid connection and a solid theory. That because a lot of people didn't survive those MK Ultra programs, right? And they're just wasting assets. They're just wasting people. Kathy O'Brien said even very few actually made it out of the programs and got to be used in any kind of operation. And then even the people that were used in the operation were normally killed by the age of 30.
Yep.
Right? So when you look at it like that, you would think that they would try and figure out a different way to create a psychic or a spy or a remote viewer or somebody that has ESP abilities other than trauma, because you're just wasting assets that way. You're wasting good people, right? In their eyes, they're wasting good people, right? That's not my personal. I don't think any of that stuff should ever be done to any individual, right? But I think if you look at it like that they're trying to induce an out-of-body experience, and if my theory is correct in that the out-of-body experience or near-death experience has something to do with these abilities, then they would want to study that. They would want to get to the bottom of that in order of, instead of just traumatizing people to unlock the abilities or create a MK Ultra slave to do God knows what on the planet, they would just do it hemisync like, to get the consciousness out of the body. Right?
Sure. It makes perfect sense. And, I really like that you mentioned the scenario with Ingo Swann, whose story is every bit as intriguing as Robert Monroe's, and how these near-death, out-of-body experiences are still, more or less a psychic break, albeit a naturally occurring one. So obviously, when you're trying to recreate this in a lab, surroundings, things could get ugly really quick. And something I've heard about that is interesting, and I don't know just how consequential it is, because we are seeing a lot of drastic actions by people who typically would not be taking these drastic actions. And it appears as if some of their ability to follow through with these objectives come from outside of themselves, or, quote unquote, out of body. And I'm wondering how much of this is that patterning that you're discussing, because it is all about getting something, much like training an animal, getting something used to a pattern, kind of like Pavlov and his dogs, that Pavlovian theory where you want a desired objective in the physical, and if you just keep doing the same thing in the background, you will get that. And I wanted to ask you if you think if there's any cases in more modern times that you could point a finger out and say, I'm not sure, but this may have been part of a government program.
I really think that a large majority of it is. I think that the contact experiences, the UFO sightings, the traumatic events that have happened in the past 20 years involving schools, grade schools, majority, and bars and superstores and all that. You're just going to have to put two and two together here.
Yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Have all been psychological operations, psychological experiments. And when it comes to it's exactly like what's happening now with the balloon nonsense. Mm-hmm. Right? And the media jumping on the bandwagon of unidentified flying objects, right? They're like, oh, there's so many UFOs, we're getting invaded. There's so many unidentified things that's happening in the sky right now, and why wouldn't they have mentioned this to 10 to 15 or even 20 years ago? It's an agenda. It's an operation, right? Why did it take since the Roswell event of 1947 all the way until 2020 for the government to admit that there are real unidentified flying objects in the sky. They just want us to forget about all of that other nonsense because they finally came out and admitted it. And the only reason that they would do that is because it's a psychological operation. Literally, that's the only reason that they would do it. If it wasn't a psychological operation, they would have admitted it way sooner. Decades ago. They've been like, oh yeah, guess what? There are unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomenon going on. But they've waited so long, and that only concludes one scenario, that it's a full-fledged psychological operation. And we know that the Air Force was also interested in MK Ultra stuff. Apparently, which, again, there's no proof for this either, but apparently the Air Force picked up the MK Ultra programs after the CIA took the fall for them. And they just picked up right where the CIA left off. And they've been running the operation since the mid-50s. Mm-hmm. Which makes a lot of sense surrounding ET contacts, surrounding UFOs. I mean, who's in charge of the airspace? The Air Force. So it makes sense that if they were running some kind of op, it would have to do with aliens and UFOs. Now, I'm not saying that aliens don't exist, right? Don't confuse, the audience isn't confusing what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that they don't exist and that people's contact experiences weren't real to them. But it is very possible, Ryan, with the kind of technology that we have now, the V2K technology, the manipulation of our nervous system, with the implantation of thoughts, ideas, beliefs directly into our head, distance does not matter. They can do this to anyone, anywhere on the planet. And it's just interesting, after the CIA's MK Ultra programs went open air to everybody on the planet, everyone started having these contact experiences and saying that they've been abducted by aliens, that they've seen several UFOs in the sky. Mm-hmm. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's just a coincidence. Who knows? But I think that it's very, very strange. And we've seen this uptick since the early 2000s of contactees, the abduction phenomenon, which we know that the abductions started with Betty and Barney Hill. Well, it was not started there, but that was the most mainstream one that was ever reported in 1961. You know, and then it's just kind of snowballed from there. And again, 1961 was after all of the MK Ultra programs. It was after World War II. I can't find any documentation describing anyone being abducted by a UFO. Now, this is very specific here. I'm not talking about entity abduction or fairy abduction or any of that stuff. I can't find one case, and if someone has it, please send it to me or something, because I'd be very interested to read about it, that before Betty and Barney Hill of 1961, that they were abducted by a UFO and taken on a ship and experimented on by aliens. Can't find it.
Mm-mm. No, not that I'm aware of, unless, you know, it's super, super rare and old. And it does seem like these psychological operations kind of have a parapsychology twist to them, and the consequences are crazy. I mean, and I'm probably going to get into a little bit of trouble, and I probably shouldn't even say what I'm going to say mentioning in a comment, but a government remote viewing program that had a lot to do with the invasion of Iraq and even the use of the Stargate program. I won't mention the viewer, but you know him and I know him, to view and jump into Saddam's head.
Yes.
And then we have Saddam Hussein being taken out, get this, by his own people. I mean, if that isn't proof of this, I mean, most Iraqis love the guy. They had him on his watches. They had pictures of him on their car, scent trees, his picture on their watches. I mean, they hated his son, but most loved Saddam. They had pictures of him in their house. But I was floored after the whole Iraqi situation that he was taken out by his own people. And it perfectly seems explained by some of these declassified CIA documents like you're discussing that are coming out, where they have figured this patterning. And I wanted to read a really quick, this is from the Monroe Institute.
Yes.
Magic. This is, and the amount of data that goes into this, I don't think people understand how much they have studied this. So it sounds crazy, but here it is. Magic perfectly explained in declassified CIA document. This technique involves the use of consciousness to achieve desired objectives in the physical, emotional, or intellectual sphere. It involves concentration on the desired objective while in focus 12 state. Extension of the individual's perception that the objective into the whole expanded consciousness and its projection into the universe with the intention that the desired object is already a matter of established achievement, which is destined to be realized within the time frame specified. This particular methodology is based on the belief that the thought patterns generated by our consciousness in a state of expanded awareness create holograms, which present the situation we desire to spring about, and in doing so establish the basis for actual realization of the goal. Once the thought-generated hologram of the sought-after objective is established in the universe, it becomes an aspect of reality, which interacts with the universal hologram to bring about the desired objective, which might not otherwise be possible under other circumstances or ever occur. In other words, the technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in time-space, and applies to us if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity. However, the most complicated and more complicated the objective sought, and the more radically it departs from our current reality, the more time the universal hologram will need to reorient the reality sphere to accommodate our desires. Monroe trainers caution against attempting to force the pace of this process because the individual could succeed in dislocating his existing reality with drastic consequences.
Wow.
So you're right, man. I think it's perfect. They have got this down to a science.
Wow, that is incredible. That is put into words that are easily digestible. I'm kind of all over the place, but that is a perfect explanation for everything that's happening in our reality. Now, imagine if they can put that fake holographic experience that is designed for a specific group of people into everyone's heads.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think that that's exactly what they've done. Holy crap, dude. You need to, if you can send me that quote or the document or whatever.
For sure, man. I will. I've got it. Yeah, dude. I can't tell you where I got it, but I got it. It's
Yes, please send that document to me because that explains everything that I've been trying to say and explains it all in a very neatly put together paragraph or a couple of paragraphs that you just read. Incredible.
It's incredible. And, the part that really spooks me is that it kind of says anything can be done if you have enough time allotted to doing it. You just can't force it too quickly, too powerfully, or you will literally, it sounds like the individual, whoever that is, whether the remote viewer or the quote unquote magician from a parapsychological standpoint, but whoever is doing the concentration towards the desired objective, you don't want to push them too far because you could dislocate them from this reality.
And then they'll think that the holographic projection reality that they created in their head was actually real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like they would just, I don't know, just completely dislocate from our existing reality. And I don't know if that means they would go mad or if we would have something like a Mandela effect. I really don't know what that means, but I think that the methodology involved explains pretty well that it's pretty scary. Much like you said, just about anything can be accomplished if they put their minds to it. No pun intended.
Wow, that's really incredible, and it's I'm glad that exists because it just explained everything that I've been trying to say this entire time during this interview and what I've been trying to say for like a year now. That it's basically like an egregorical reality. I've been trying to explain it in a different way, but the same outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like an egregore. And
I think that's a really good way to explain it. Yeah.
That you put your thoughts, ideas, energies into, and then it becomes real in your reality. And the more people that believe in that thought idea that's been created, the more power and more energy that's been accumulated into it makes it more real in our reality, right? Because I think that we are that powerful, that our consciousness is that powerful that it can literally create something that isn't even real. Now it can be real to us, right? But a blanketed real reality for everyone, it's like people looking for like a singular truth, right? They want a blanketed singular truth out there. And if it doesn't align with their previously established beliefs, then they throw it out the door, right? Well, I have news for a lot of these people. There is no singular truth. There is not one explanation for all of this phenomenon. It's multi-layered. There's different reasons for everything, and there's multiple reasons for everything. Things just don't happen for one singular reason. It's a multi-layered many branches to the tree. And there's branches on those branches, and there's branches on those branches.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And digging down deep and bringing this whole thing down to earth and realizing that a lot of this stuff is due to our own psyche and what we are creating in our reality. And that's been the biggest perpetuator of the alien and ET phenomenon. Right? That's why it's a spiritual experience. That's why it's a consciousness experience. It's like a holographic projection. And that's also why no one has ever met a physical extraterrestrial that you can literally reach out and touch. That's physical as me and you, Ryan.
Yep.
That's sitting in your room that you can reach out and shake hands with. That's not in a astral form. That's not in a dream state. That you're not experiencing under some kind of hallucinogenic drug or some other form of drug. That is the reason, because it's within us. It's happening within us. It's happening within our head, within our psyche. That's why they're not physical, because they can't be physical, because they're a part of us, and it's a sort of fabrication of our psyche. It's exactly what you just read in that document from the Monroe Institute. Right? It's a holographic projection. And when you take that holographic projection as something real, then you're just basically creating stuff and putting it out there. And that's why no one has any physical evidence. That's why no one has any physical evidence of abductions. That's why people have never met a physical ET, because they're not physical. They're within you. They are you, and they're a part of inner space, not outer space. See, we've been programmed to think of space as just being outer space. Right? NASA doesn't say outer space anymore. None of these people none of the three-letter organizations, the Air Force or any of that, ever say outer space anymore. They just say space. And we've been so programmed into thinking that when we hear the word space, that they're automatically referring to outer space. But when you look up the definition of what space is, space can be anything. Space could be extra room in your house. Space can be the ocean. Space could be in your head. Inner space. So that is what I believe a lot of this phenomenon. And, I'm not trying to downplay, people's abduction experiences or their contact experiences or anything like that. If they think that they experienced that, then that's fine. And the real people that have experienced that don't care what you say.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. You can call them liars. You just tell them that their experiences are made up, that it's all in their head, and that they have no evidence, no proof, and they don't care. Now, the ones that do care are the ones that have something to hide, right? And don't want to necessarily admit that it could be happening in their head and it not be real. It could be a fabrication, that it could be a holographic projection, and that it is actually coming from you. And then you get into the whole, can we even travel in space too, right? I don't think that a human body is meant to be in space for long periods of time. Like, you need a certain procedure, let's say, as a human being to even go to Bali. Right? Mm-hmm. You have to have a medical procedure to go to Bali. Not surrounding 2020 or any. They've been doing that forever.
Yeah. Because
things are different there. It's a different kind of atmosphere. It's a different kind of not gravity, but I can't think of the word that I'm trying to say. But taking that into consideration, what would you need to go live on a different planet? I don't think that we could withstand, because we're born on Earth. Our body is aligned with Earth's atmosphere, Earth's gravity. I don't think that we would be able to walk around on any other planet as we do here and survive. And I don't think that anybody else coming from another planet could walk around here and survive. I think it's impossible. And I think that that's the whole augmentation side of this that they want to get humanity into, this cybernetic brain implant, this kind of AI-driven reality, making us more machine and more cyborg than human. It's so that we could possibly exist in space and that we could possibly exist on other planets and colonize other planets, because and there's a lot of proof of this. Rudolf Steiner talks about it too, that humans aren't meant to be, they can't exist in space as we are, like natural biological humans now. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So you would need some kind of augmentation, some kind of enhancement if you wanted to live in space or live on a different planet. And I think that is kind of their plan. I mean, we've seen that from Elon Musk. Elon Musk wants to colonize Mars. And he also wants to put a brain implant in you. So something's not lining up there. So, I don't know. I don't think that, just like we can't go out into space, just like we can't walk around on other planets as the biological human that we are, because we're actually from Earth, we're from Earth's atmosphere, Earth's gravity, all the things that are happening in the skies around us. I don't think that other species could come to the planet as an organic being either and live.
I'm with you about going to other planets. The human body, I'm with you. It does not seem feasible, let alone the fact that we are to believe, I'm not a scientist, that astronauts ride on a rocket or spacecraft going faster than a bullet. The fact that the things in the Earth's orbit around 250 miles above Earth are moving up to 17,500 miles per hour, according to NASA, which is about 10 times faster than a speeding bullet. And we know what a bullet does to a human body, so it can only make sense that moving that fast would have some repercussion, unless, like you said, we are in some simplified mode, we're made more plastic in some way, we can be more compatible with those speeds on some level. I just don't know what the reality of them. We know that astronauts go through a lot, I just don't know exactly what. And I think that, this transhumanist agenda, maybe there's something to all this. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and also being in a rocket and going faster than a speeding bullet through space, a little pebble would completely destroy your entire craft. You're going that fast, you hit a little, driving on a motorcycle down the highway and a bug hits your face and you don't have protective gear, that shit stings, bro. That's a little bug. So imagine traveling fast as a bullet through space in a little space rock or a little debris hits your rocket. It's done for. Right? That's why I don't think that we can travel in space with standard rocketry. I think it's impossible.
Yeah.
I don't think we can really get outside of the Earth's atmosphere in a standard rocket. For one, rockets are 90% fuel. And Wernher von Braun stated that it would take a rocket the size of the Empire State Building to be able to get to the moon. Mm-hmm. And it's not because we needed that size of a rocket to get there. It's because we needed that amount of gas to get there. Because a standard rocket, its payload has to be 90% gas, and that leaves very little room for crew and things that you actually need to survive the trip. So, if anything, I believe that we have developed highly advanced technology. We have proof of this, of the Sonora Aero Club in the mid-1800s creating anti-gravity craft in Northern California. Peter Menes and Charles Delshaw and you can look that up. There's schematics. There's drawings of the craft they were creating. Walter Bosley's written several books on this. Then you fast forward a little bit to World War II. The Germans were also working on something very similar with the Bell technology. And I believe that the Bell technology was the engine of the craft, right? And they just strapped on the engine onto some kind of saucer-shaped craft in order for it to lift up off of the ground. But they were using a red spinning Mercury, and the Sonora Aero Club was using a green spinning Mercury fuel additive to lift, to be able to lift the craft up off of the ground. And then we have all of the German aerospace techs and scientists and all of them coming to the United States through Project Paperclip. Then we have the Roswell event of 1947, 2 years after the war. We have Admiral Byrd going to Antarctica in 1946. It ended in 1947, a very, very short trip. Now the stories there, I'm not too sure, but he did stop in Chile and gave a statement there that at some point we're going to have to fight technology that can go from pole to pole in a matter of minutes. That's not the direct quote, that's just me paraphrasing. And then 1962 we have the Washington flap event, 1952, sorry. 1952 is the Washington Flap event, which is the UFOs that were spotted over the White House. Then we have the Kecksburg event we have the first abduction before that, which was 1961 with Betty and Barney Hill. And then we have the Kecksburg event of 1965. Then we go to the moon in 1969. So whenever you look at all of these events and the sequence that it happens in, you realize that the military, CIA, through their organizations, are doing MK Ultra programs, are doing psychological operations. They have this technology. They've been working on it since the 1800s, which the Sonora Aero Club was funded by Prussia, which Prussia then became Germany. And so you have all these connections here and evidence that it's our technology that we've developed and that we've created. And the reverse engineering aspect of all this stuff has been put into the consciousness of people, crashed alien craft, alien technology retrieval and all that. And then we've reverse engineered it, and it's all from aliens. That's been put out there, in my personal opinion, to cover up the fact that it's us and that we've created it and that we have had the technology for a really long time. I mean, James Forrestal wanted to release this technology, and he was really good friends with JFK. JFK was kind of like his protege. And there is documentation that JFK and James Forrestal both went to Germany after World War II, and there's speculation that they looked at the anti-gravity craft that the Germans were working on. Then they came back to the United States. JFK ran for Senate. James Forrestal became the very first Secretary of Defense, and that is where when MJ-12 was born.
Fascinating, man.
And James Forrestal wanted to release the technology. He wanted it to be a public thing, right? He's like, why are we holding on to this? Why are we making this so secretive? And there was someone or something that wanted to do this black budget style. Mm-hmm. Keep it all under wraps, not let it get out to the public. And they made Forrestal out to be a crazy wackadoo, and they locked him up at Bethesda Hospital, and Naval Hospital, and apparently, no proof, they killed him. They pushed him out of,
Yeah.
I think, a 16-story window or whatever, a really high up window, and they said that it was suicide and that he killed himself. And I think that JFK was trying to do this more openly and not so secretive, right? And because JFK was the first person in 61, I believe, he made a statement to Congress that we should focus our efforts to getting to the moon by the end of the decade. And then again in 62 at Rice Stadium. I might not be 100% sure on those dates, but it's around that area. He made that statement at Rice Stadium that to the public that we should, focus our efforts to getting to the moon by the end of the decade. And I personally believe that that was JFK's push to let them reveal the technology that we had. And he was trying to do it out in the open because he's seen what happened to his friend and his buddy, James Forrestal. He was making a big push to reveal the technology internally. And they killed him. Again, speculation. Don't know for sure if they killed him or not, but he ended up dying, right? Put it that way. And then so JFK went back and he was like, how can I do this and not get killed? Right? And he was like, well, I'll just do it out in the open. I'll just try and force their hand to reveal the technology early, because I believe he knew that we couldn't get to the moon in standard rocketry. So he was like, okay, well, let me try and push this out early. We'll make a statement to say, we should focus our efforts to getting to the moon by the end of the decade. And that will force them to, reveal this anti-gravity craft in the real way that we might possibly get to the moon. But they ended up killing him anyway. Right? And that's not the only reason for the assassination, right? There's many, many more reasons. So I don't want people to think or believe that it was the only reason that he was killed or assassinated, because it's not. That's just my one of the many possibilities that he could have been taken out there. So I think that's what was going on, and we know that the Apollo missions were actually designed to set up military bases on other planets in our solar systems, on other moons. It wasn't just meant to go to the moon. It was meant to go to Mars and all these other places to set up, basically the militarization of space. And that was a statement that was kind of, out there in the early 60s whenever we decided that we were going to try and make it to the moon, but then they just brushed it under the rug. They're like, nah, forget that. We didn't say that. We didn't make any of those statements. And then it just went black, and it just went super dark. And there's another thing here that's proof of militarization of space, which is Operation Looking Glass. Are you familiar with Operation Looking Glass?
Amazing. Yeah, but let's tell our listeners about it really quick.
So Operation Looking Glass it's not a technology to see into the future or into the past. It's an actual Air Force command post in space with the ability to launch nukes from Earth in the event that the ground-based communications center is rendered unusable or destroyed. Right, so in the secret space program people and SSP people, super soldiers, have taken that concept, that looking glass concept, and turned it into something that it's not. It's another cover-up. They don't want you to know that they have already militarized space, and that Space Force was just a rebranding of a previously existing program that we had been up there since 1962, or 1961, when Operation Looking Glass became an actual program. Which is another interesting thing, is that the Air Force was running NASA's test flights in 1961, the Gemini program, and there's another one I can't think of off the top of my head, but they're running two different NASA test flights. The Air Force was. It wasn't NASA that was actually running them. And they never got outside of the upper atmosphere of the planet. And I think that is the signal that gave JFK, because they never broke out of the upper atmosphere of the planet, because I don't believe that they can with standard rockets. And JFK was like, okay, this is my cue right here to try and get them to force their hand to reveal anti-gravity craft, and what we've been working on since the late 40s.
Man, it's so amazing. And, you know, I know we're going over here a bit, but I need to say that you are super impressing me with all your research into all this. And I think it's super important at this time, given all of the UAP, the Sataloon, the satellite Chinese balloon, the stuff being shot down out of the sky by our military fighter pilots, and the fact that Wernher von Braun, if I'm not mistaken, on his deathbed, purportedly or allegedly said that there would be a attempt to psychologically operate a false alien invasion. And what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a bunch of nonsense. To me personally, I don't think that we'll ever get any kind of alien invasion, false or not, because what would be the reason to do that? There's zero reason in my book for them to even attempt a false flag alien invasion, or if it's a real alien invasion, why would real aliens come here and invade? It makes absolutely no sense. If it's about control, it still doesn't make any sense, Ryan, because they've proven over and over and over again that they can control the public, the population, and control the world without aliens.
Mm-hmm.
They've proved that several times. 2020 is a really great example.
Yeah.
Right? They've proven that they can shut down the economy, they can shut down the world at one foul swoop, just like that, without aliens.
It was spooky.
They've proven that they can psychologically manipulate people, that they can put something on the TV that isn't necessarily true and get people to believe in it without aliens. So I really would like to talk to somebody about this that believes in the alien threat narrative and the false flag alien invasion, or even a real alien invasion. Because again, if it's a real alien invasion, then what would be the point of that as well? Right? It doesn't seem like we're not doing anything wrong, I don't believe. I think that this reality is just set up the way that it is because that's the way that it is. You know, like, if they're coming to save us, like, what are they really coming to save us from, right? It doesn't make any sense. The reality is that we're just here to experience this reality. Now, yes, is there corruption? Well, there's going to be corruption. There's going to be all these different secrets in the government being like that because of the duality that we have here on this planet. That's always going to exist. You can't rid this reality of polarity and duality. If you do, then we no longer exist as this physical being. We would be someplace else. And that's why I think that we're so special here, Ryan. And people really just need to dive head first into this reality and quit thinking that it's shitty or that it's stupid and that they hate it. They shouldn't hate it. They should love it and embrace it and realize that it's just a part of the process of being here. Some people have really shitty circumstances, and I recognize that, and I have empathy for them. But unfortunately, that's the kind of hand that some people were dealt. And it's really no one's fault but our own fault. We've let it get to this point. If we hate it so much, we should have done something about it 50 years ago. Or 23 years ago. We should have seen this coming. We should have stood up and done something about it then. Now we're just letting it ride out. And we're just going along with every agenda and every thought and idea that's given to us. It really seems like they're trying to extinguish critical thought and common sense from the consciousness of everybody on the planet all at the same time. And again, that's done through trauma, drugging, psychological manipulation, harmful frequencies, the TV, the screen that's in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that they need a false flag alien invasion. They don't need a real alien invasion to accomplish their goals. They can do it without all that, and honestly, it would probably be way easier to do. And I want someone to come up with a good explanation of the reason why they would do it. Because logically speaking, critical thinking speaking, common sense speaking, they don't need it. And based off of that, I don't think that they'll do it.
We are pretty easy to control, man. It's fair enough. I think your explanation is 100% on target. I think earlier you mentioning the fact that a lot of this stuff is being used much like an egregore is beyond super impressive. And we wonder why many of the top 1% elites and government rulers are rumored to believe in ancient mystery religions and practice rituals that in effect back up to the theory of egregores. But, it does seem like they believe in natural law and that these sorceress elites and their secret societies and world power brokers who kind of plot the different moves that are made upon us know something we don't know. And I agree with you, man. I'm glad there's people like you out there that are kind of seeing through all this. And you tantalized me tremendously, man, with Charles Delshaw, Walter Bosley, and that red spinning Mercury. That's something I need to look more into. That sounds super cool. As we wrap up, let's tell listeners where they can keep up with all things Ryder Lee and Raised by Giants.
Yes, sir. Thanks so much for having me on, Ryan. I really appreciate you. Very fascinating conversation. But before I do that, you were mentioning to me the other day that you've been investigating into a little bit of the secret societies and stuff. Can you give people a little idea of what you've been looking into recently?
Yeah, it's been really crazy and very strange. My alma mater of the University of Utah is, well, for I'll just cut to the chase, has an order of 322, the Skull and Bones there. It is one that started in 1910, 1909, depending on who you talk to and what the history books say. But a very secretive second branch or order of 322, Skull and Bones. And obviously everybody knows, or many people know in our realm, that is originally from Yale University. So I've been looking into that, and yeah, just kind of looking at, some of the interesting stuff taking place, possibly in the shadows, and how the members of many of these groups don't coincidentally arrive where they tend to arrive in life. They are sort of placed there.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I'm gonna have to do some more research into it, into the White Brotherhood and the Dark Brotherhood, because I feel like this has been a battle between a lot of different secret societies on which direction to push humanity toward. Like, I think it boils down to like do we give them the knowledge or we don't give them the knowledge? Right? Do we give everybody on the planet all of the secrets and ideas and beliefs that we have? Would they be able to handle it? Or do we don't? And do we keep it all for ourselves? And I think there's been some people, like I was explaining with James Forrestal, in regards to the technology. He wanted to release the technology, but everyone was against him, right? And I think that there's been a few people throughout our history that have wanted to release knowledge that's been a part of some of these secret societies and the White Brotherhood and those kinds of groups that's wanted to release the knowledge and let it be public information, but they've been stopped somewhere along the way. But yeah, I think that's very interesting. Definitely keep diving into that.
It's pretty epic. Yeah, you start looking down it, and it's an interesting rabbit hole, man.
Yes, Ryan, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate you. People can find me on YouTube at Raised by Giants, on Rockfin at Raised by Giants, on all the different podcast platforms as well, and on Instagram at Raised by Giants Pod. And I just recently made a TikTok, so
nice.
I know people are gonna hate me, whatever, but I think that it'll be a good promotional tool for my show, and that's really all that it's for, is just promoting my show. And I think that we have to utilize as many of these social media platforms as possible to get the word out and get solid, factual information to people. And also on Twitter at Raised by Giants 8. Thanks so much, brother. Appreciate your time here this evening.
Thank you, man. Ryder Lee, bringing the heat and telling us how it is. Definitely go over and check out Ryder Lee at Raised by Giants. Support him on the new TikTok. And it's something you should check out. He's always bringing impressive, tantalizing information to the forefront. Much respect for that, and I always appreciate talking to him and having him on. If you have not subscribed to Hero Paranormal on Patreon, please go to Patreon, look up Hero Paranormal, and subscribe. Otherwise, you're missing a ton of content behind the paywall. You can also get to that content via Podbean at heroparanormal.com. And until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
If you guys are still listening in, I want to apologize for the audio on this particular episode. We had a variety of technical difficulties which were impossible to explain. Took me over 6 hours to figure it out. It was literally as if somebody came in and muted from time to time one or both of us. it took tons of work from an audio perspective to even get it in a mode that was utterly listenable at any length. And it was a nightmare. Volumes up and down, mutings, and I don't know if it was necessarily just the revelations that Ryder Lee brought to the table, or if there was something more. It was very strange, very odd, never happened before to that extent. But I want to apologize for the audio. At least we got the message across, hopefully in some bearable form of listening. And until next time, take care.